Hey, what's up everybody? This is Brian, and in this course, you're going to learn the secrets of submitting a completed app to the App Store so other people can enjoy all of your hard-earned work. Publishing to the App Store is the last step in a long process, and like development, contains its own trials and tribulations as well. There's a whole series of steps that must be done to get your work published. The good news is that a lot of this work is now automated for you. Xcode has made tremendous improvements in what used to be a major pain point in development. When I first started developing in iOS back in 2010, the process of, say, provisioning a device for development meant following some obscure technical document by candlelight that was fraught with peril. These days, you just need an up-to-date Apple developer account, a unique bundle identifier, and you're going to be off to the races. A lot of the pain points have now been automated away for you. While Xcode does handle a lot of the work for you, what happens when something fails? As developers, it's our responsibility to understand these processes so that we can fix them when they go wrong. So in this course, we're going to be doing everything by hand so you can have a pain-free experience when submitting your own apps. Now, before you start, you should be comfortable with Xcode. You need to know your way around it. Now, you won't be doing any coding. Most of the work that we'll be doing will take place in a web browser configuring your submission. This course contains only one part, but there's lots of topics to cover. First, you'll get an overview of the human interface guidelines and how they can affect your app. Then you'll learn how to create an Apple developer account and the features provided by joining the Apple developer program. After which, you'll learn about certificates and how to create them. Once you're comfortable with certificates, you'll learn about profiles and what they do and how to create them on your own. Next, you'll be introduced to App Store Connect. And finally, you'll actually submit an app to App Store Connect using Xcode. In the process, you'll learn about the choices you make at the start of development can directly impact how your app is received and reviewed. With all that said, let's get busy submitting apps. But before we do it, let's first consider why apps may be rejected. And for that, we'll need to review some guidelines, which we'll do in the next episode. When you start developing apps, the choices you make at the beginning of your design and development can directly impact how your app is reviewed by the App Store at the end of your development. Apple has a special set of guidelines called the Human Interface Guidelines, or otherwise known as the HIG. And if you stray from those guidelines, your app will be rejected for a HIG violation. The HIG defines best practices for app development, as well as states how individual app components should behave. The purpose is to create a consistent user experience across the entire app ecosystem. For example, in the gesture section, the HIG recommends that you use standard gestures and provides the reason for this practice. That is, so extra effort on the user isn't needed to discover them. Later, it states to avoid using standard gestures to perform a non-standard action. Imagine you were working with a table and decided to incorporate a swipe mechanic to duplicate an item. Instead of swipe to delete, your app performs swipe to duplicate. This goes against your user's muscle memory and would create a very weird experience. So chances are this might be rejected. Notice that I said might. The Apple review team is made up of people, and people make mistakes all the time. A clear violation to one person may be questionable to another. Some developers will try to take advantage of this by rolling the dice in hopes of getting their app approved. Now, this is a terrible idea. Sure, you might have passed through a HIG violation, but remember, every time you need to update your app, it needs to go through a new review process. Chances are your HIG violation will be caught and you'll need to address it then. Moral of the story, follow the Human Interface Guidelines. If you think you are in violation, work to get out of that gray area. At the end of the day, the HIG is there to make for a consistent app experience, so follow the guidelines. Your users and any future developers on the project will thank you for it. To get started with the Human Interface Guidelines, open up a new browser window and head over to the following URL. You'll see that right off the bat, there are different guidelines for different platforms. This makes sense as different platforms employ different ways of interacting with the user interface. Since we're publishing for iOS, click the iOS platform. On the left-hand side, you'll see a bunch of categories covering a bunch of topics. If you're interested in learning about buttons, click the Controls category and then click Buttons. At this point, you'll have a detailed breakdown of buttons. You'll see for system buttons, the HIG advises you to use verbs in the title. It recommends to use title case and keep the title short. In this case, the HIG also points to documentation, which provides even more information about buttons. This goes deeper into the mechanics of a button. As you can see, Apple developers have put in a lot of work thinking about button behaviors. The HIG doesn't just cover controls. For instance, if you open System Capabilities and select Notifications, you'll find an excellent guide on how to design an excellent notification experience. In short, everything in this document will make your app better, and I suggest you take the time to read up on it every so often as the guidelines tend to evolve, just like the platform. While we have the human interface guidelines to make our apps work well, we also have the App Store review guidelines as well. These guidelines are designed to give you insight in the app review process, as well as cover best practices. In short, this document explains what is permissible in the App Store. While this document isn't as glamorous as the human interface guidelines, the information provided is critical. For instance, your app may adhere to the human interface guidelines, but if your app provides user-generated content but doesn't provide any way to filter out objectionable material, your app will be rejected. If you offer loot boxes but don't disclose the odds of receiving each type of item, then your app will be rejected as well, and so on. When starting a new app, make sure to review this document to see what is permissible. After all, it's better to learn at the start of our project than having to redesign an app at the end of it. Open up a new window and head over to the URL to open the App Store Review Guidelines. Now, before we dive into the guidelines, you'll see that this document is part of the App Store site on the developer portal. It gives you a lot of information. For instance, the developer insights provide tips on various aspects on working with the App Store. It also provides a lot of resources to manage each stage of your app development. Click on the launch and you'll see a link to the App Store Review Guidelines. You'll also notice a document on the common app rejection reasons as well. This is also worth checking out. For now, just click on the App Store Review Guidelines. You'll see a document broken down into sections. The Before You Submit is a great checklist of things you should do at the start of the submission process. You'll also notice links to the HIG as well as marketing guidelines. Scrolling down, you'll see a comprehensive list about what is and isn't permissible. Read through all of these, paying special attention to the sections that cover your app. Finally, the After You Submit section provides resources on the process of app review and how to submit an appeal if you disagree with the judgment. Keep this page bookmarked and check it every so often to make sure your knowledge is up to date. To publish an app on Apple's App Store, you need to get started by creating an Apple Developer account. An Apple Developer account is just a plain old Apple account that is enrolled in the developer program. When enrolling in the program, you can enroll as an individual and for an organization. For enrolling as an individual, you need to enable two-factor authentication for your Apple account as well as provide some personal information. Now, as an organization, you need some additional requirements, such as a DUNS number, a legal entity status, and some other requirements. For more information, check out the enrollment requirements. Now, by creating an Apple developer account, you have some development benefits, such as you have free access to Xcode and you can test your builds on a device. By joining the Apple development program, you get access to advanced app capabilities such as CloudKit, but most importantly, you gain the right to distribute your apps. You can also distribute Safari extensions as well as Mac OS apps as well. To join the program, you need to pay $99 a year. If you are new to app development, a good strategy is to develop your app using a regular Apple account, and when your app is tested and ready for distribution, you should sign up to the Apple Developer Program. So let's get started creating our own Apple account. I already have a developer account, but for the sake of demonstration, I'll create a new one. Click the Create Account link. At this point, add your information to create a new Apple account. Once you've created a new account, you need to verify your email. You'll be sent a code. Type in that code. You'll also need to do the same for your phone number as well. Once you've verified both your email and phone number, you'll be presented with an Apple Developer Agreement. Review this agreement, and if you agree to the terms, click the Agreement checkbox. Of course, you can't create a developer account until you've accepted the terms. At this point, you'll have a basic developer account. You can download Xcode, test out your app on a limited amount of devices, and have access to a small amount of features. To distribute your apps, you need to join the Apple Developer Program. Click the Join button, and on the Info page, click the Enroll button. The next page will inform you about the enrollment requirements. As an individual, you'll need to enable two-factor authentication. Clicking on the link, you'll see a walkthrough on how to enable two-factor authentication. Follow the instructions on this page to enable it. In my case, I'll enable two-factor authentication on my iPad. Apple will make some authentication checks. Once Apple has confirmed that you have enabled two-factor authentication, you can continue. Scroll to the bottom of the page and click the Start Your Enrollment button. You'll have the option to enroll on your device. For me, I'll continue enrolling via the web. Now, provide your personal information and press the Continue button. The next page asks your entity type. In my case, I'm registering as an individual. You also have other registration options, so make sure to check out the documentation if that applies to you. Once selected, click the Continue button. Finally, you'll need to accept another developer agreement, and then you'll need to confirm your membership. You'll be prompted to sign in once again, and then you provide your payment information. And with that, you'll join the Apple Developer Program. And that's it. You'll receive a couple of emails confirming of your enrollment, and with that, we're off to the races. The next thing for us to do is to set up certificates, which we'll cover in the next episode.